everybody, and welcome to Gamers Without Borders. It is Tuesday, March 6, 2012. This is Test Zero, and with me is Chris the Nerd and Ozzy Arcane.
Hello.
Woo!
I'm sure everyone's wondering why we're not playing Mass Effect 3.
I am.
We got dragged away from it. Well, you guys did. I don't really care for Mass
I don't
Effect.
have it yet.
Oh, I got dragged away. I got it on pause right now, so we can do this thing here.
So he couldn't even get away from the game fully. He just has it paused and idling in the background.
Yep.
That's how addictive the game is for him.
Correct. 11 hours I'm already in.
So today we're going to be talking about DLC, and by extension, Street Fighter X Tekken and Mass Effect 3 and other bullshit practices that these companies seem to like to pull.
Yeah.
Yes.
Quite a few.
The incredible uproar there's been over the on-disc DLC in Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Capcom's been doing this for a while, but it's never been as ridiculous as withholding 12 characters that were ready for launch. And not only that, lying and saying that they weren't going to be ready in time for the game's release, and that's why they're not releasing them.
Yeah, they are ready. They're right on the disc, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
You're basically
people have proven this. They've hacked it,
Yes.
hacked the disc and found the data on them.
Yes, pirates have responded by torrenting versions of the game that have all the content unlocked.
Wow. Yeah.
And how does Capcom respond? Oh. Well, be sure to buy the game.
Instead of pirating it, it's like, well, don't pirate it, buy the game anyway.
Yeah, and
buy the game to get less content than you would as a pirate. It doesn't really get much more insulting than that, I don't think.
Yeah, and it's the game. The information leaked before the game's official release because a lot of people got the game back on Saturday, even though the street date was not until today.
But not all companies care about the street date.
Yeah, and a lot of people that order through the mail sometimes get games earlier than the actual street date. But
Yeah,
I think, as someone who's played Capcom's other recent fighters, the worst thing about them doing this stuff for so long is not just the fact that it's on disc DLC, but it's overpriced as well. It's more expensive than a lot of stuff other companies actually release as real downloadable content. Because with Marvel vs. Capcom 3, they had 2 characters that were on disc. That was a little more understandable because they were originally an incentive for people to get the collector's edition. But if you didn't get the collector's edition, they were $5 each. So we have every reason to believe these 12 characters will be $5 each, essentially making the game cost us $120 to have the same game that people on the Vita are going to have for a much smaller price.
Oh, because they're trying to push the Vita.
Yeah.
Which,
Right,
and let's not even get into how ugly the Vita is. I mean, the user interface looks like it's for a kid.
I don't know about
And then
that.
it has those it has the big round icons with the weird looking image icons that it looks like something that you would see on the Leapfrog, not a Sony product, but and then you have the games on it, which I think are ridiculously overpriced, especially as a downloadable product. There is no disc involved. There is literally no production manufacturing costs going into these games beyond the actual development of the game itself. So, even the cost of packaging, the cost of shipping, the cost of the media itself, and that is still cheaper than buying it online, which makes no sense.
Well, even the stuff that you're going to get on those cartridges are still really expensive. Like Uncharted Golden Abyss itself is $50, and that's ridiculous for that kind of a game on that kind of a system. Why would you want to pay almost full price for something that's just not as powerful as a PlayStation 3? I mean, at $50, why not just pay the $10 extra? Just get it on the PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you want to be able to play it on the go, which, I mean, honestly, if people are that obsessed with... I don't think people are that obsessed with games anymore, because the portable system is... I think it's going... There's going to be a major paradigm shift in terms of portable gaming. There aren't going to be people playing portable games as hardcore titles. They're going to be doing it as a like a casual title, like the stuff like your Puzzle Quest, your Bejeweled, your Zuma, your Angry Birds, even your stuff like that, your Word Twists. And these are the games that you play when you're waiting in line. You're not going to go to the park to play this AAA hardcore title. You're going to be sitting at home on a comfortable couch playing this game for 8.5 hours on end, or 11 hours for Mass Effect 3. You're going to be playing it on your couch or on your bed and just comfortable like that. You're not going to be sitting just to play a game like that on the portable.
Especially with a game like, any real fighting game. Those games are really aimed towards competitive players that spend a lot of time online. That's not exactly something you're going to be wanting to concentrate on a whole lot while you're out and about doing other stuff. That's something you do when you're at home, relaxed, and you might as well be doing it on the TV instead of on the Vita.
And the Vita has connection. You could output to a TV, right?
Can you?
It has.
And they had that on the PSP. I would imagine they would have that on the Vita. You could output to the TV like through the PS3 or to the TV itself, I believe.
On the PSP, it was horrible though, because it was like letterbox and didn't even fill the screen.
Well, I had a friend that was the only way he could play his PSP, because he had really bad eyesight, so he had to play it on the big screen. And there were a lot of really good games that were specifically for the PSP, like a lot of Disgaea and Dissidia. A lot of good RPGs were specifically on the PSP.
Yeah, which is the only reason I have mine.
Yeah, but even if you look at the Vita and you look at that commercial that they have for it, touting like, oh, your leaderboards are always in danger, and you see the guys walking around the street, this busy street, looking all around them at people who have Vitas and are playing these online games and beating leaderboards, it's like, that's really not a system seller. That you have leaderboards. I mean, you have an online system that has leaderboards. You have the same thing on a PS3. You can still lose a leaderboard spot to some schlub who stays at home all day.
Exactly. I mean, I imagine that they're trying to tout it kind of like the friend pass. You pass by and you share your scores with each other, but you don't fucking know this person. You're walking down the street and they just happen to have a Vita, and you send them there. You don't know anything about them. Maybe you'll play with them, maybe you won't, but you don't really care what their scores are, because if you connect to the online leaderboard, you can see who the best in the world is, and you can try to beat that score. You don't care about beating some guy that you're just passing on the street.
Because he's just some guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And back to the topic of DLC, because we went off on kind of a tangent there.
Well, that's what we do on this show.
Yeah,
right.
But with how much me and Chris dislike handheld systems, we could be here all night if we talk about that. The worst thing about this whole thing is how some of Capcom's fanboys defend this stuff. Like you saw my tweet message earlier where some guy had said, in response to my projected price that the game will cost us $120 in the end, I'll pay it and I'll like it. I'm like, what?
Why?
So, somebody else actually said to me, I told Chris about this yesterday, somebody else said to me on GameFAQs, I don't get it. What's the difference between whether it's on the disc or something they made afterwards?
Okay, that's your public school systems for you. I mean, having an unlock code is, I think, one of the most unconscionable things you could ever do in video games. I mean, if it's on the disc, then we should be able to use it. I made a joke on Reddit that I posted about Pokemon Blue and Red, where if it's in the game data, we should be able to access it without having to pay extra for it. That was just a joke, but at this point, they are giving you data that you cannot access unless you pay them extra. That's called double dipping, or it has some sort of legal cause, which this one guy was tried for it. The guy who does that natural cures they don't want you to know about. I actually got a hold of his damn audiobook, and it said that he was advertising that these cures were in the book. They're not. The book has a link to an online store where you can buy a subscription to the site in order to read these cures. So he's selling you the same thing twice, and that's exactly what these companies are doing. If they want to make it DLC, just leave it off the fucking disc.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people accusing companies that have stuff that's not on the disc of withholding content, but the thing is, there's no proof for that. At that point, it's all just speculation.
Yeah, but when we have proof, we have actual proof now that you are screwing us over. You are giving us this data that we cannot access unless we pay you extra money, and that is evil. If you really want your extra money, at least try a little bit of smoke and mirrors. Try lying to us. We'd rather be lied to behind our back than stabbed right in the face.
Yeah, and there have been so many people that have said, you didn't pay for the content that's on the disc. You bought a license to access the software as they decided. And you know what? Technically, legally speaking, that's true. But just because you can do something does not mean that you should. Because you know what? In New Jersey, technically you can legally fuck your sister, but it doesn't mean you should do it.
Unless she's hot. But there is a whole paradigm shift going on with the way that these games are licensed or bought. There's a lot of people who want to say that they're selling licenses to play these games, and then there's other ones that we're selling the games themselves. I don't know. Someone needs to decide exactly what's happening. I would prefer to own the game that I'm actually buying. I'm kind of kooky that way. When I spend money for something, I kind of assume that I own it, unless I'm like planning ahead of time that I'm not. But as they decide what is happening legally, things are going to change. There's going to be people protesting, and the people who are going to be hurt by this are the legitimate users. Because exactly, the people you said before, the people managed to hack the game and put on pirated versions of it that have the characters open. So these guys are able to play a game with more content in it than the people who are actually legitimately going to this company and spending their money, and then the company is going, okay, here's your gimped copy of it, when the pirates are giving them nothing and getting more out of it. That is fucked up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I was talking with Chris about this the other day, that the way software laws are written, you realize that a lot of people that are the lawmakers in this country are really old people that don't particularly understand technology.
Yeah, we saw this when we were watching the SOPA and PIPA coverage, or the Stop Online Piracy Act. The people that were making the laws, we were watching the Congress coverage, and these people didn't know what the fuck was going on. Like, they talked to their computer expert and was like, we don't care about that gobbledygook. This thing sounds good, so let's do it. Like, these are the people who invented the fucking internet.
Let's bring in the nerds.
Yeah, it's like, we really need people that actually understand this stuff to be making the laws about it. Or here's another thought that would actually be fairly simple. Sony and Microsoft could take a stand against this kind of stuff. They have the power to decide that this is not allowed on their network. Because with something else, I mean, Sony already has stupid policies that don't make any sense. Like, if you don't dub a game in English, you can't release it in the U.S. on a retail copy. It has to be digital download only. They have that rule that they're enforcing on games at random. And This is something they should have a policy against. Tell companies, no, you can't do this.
The thing that really bugs me about all this is the reason that they are making all these measures. All they're trying to do is make more money. Which, I mean, it's a company. It's what they're supposed to do. And if they went under, we wouldn't have these games at all. But the way they're going about it, then they say that they're losing so much money to pirates, and then the pirates get better treatment than their actual legitimate customers.
Yeah.
Which is so backwards. It's such a bad idea, and it's so horribly handled. I don't know why they are still doing it like this.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This one guy on GameFAQs, another, one of their defenders, was saying, games cost so much more to make nowadays than they used to, and they're only charging you $60 still. Well, Capcom's trying to make up for the costs of inflation. It's like, you know what? I don't buy that for a minute, because fighting games, as far as games go, are reasonably not that complex. There are lots of games that can clearly take a lot more work, that sell a lot less copies, and those companies aren't struggling.
Yeah. Well, because when it comes to big businesses like this, they always have to make sure that their game it sells 10 million copies. So they take out all these ads for it. You see all these ads for like the Call of Duties, your Gears of War. You almost never see game commercials on TV. And when you do, it's for the huge, huge games. And that's why they have to do that. They have to advertise it to make sure that people who aren't even gamers are buying these games just because the games cost so much to make. But then if you look at stuff like the Indie Bundle, the humble Indie Bundle, they sold their games for like $3 for 8 games, and then all the developers made money just fine. There's something going on here behind the scenes that the developers don't understand.
Yeah, there is, and the thing is, some developers do understand it. There are plenty of big name companies that don't pull stuff, at least not to the extent that Capcom does. Like, let's just for a second talk about Namco, which is the other part of the equation with this game. This game's actually made by Capcom, but next year, Namco is going to be releasing their own version, which will be Tekken Cross Street Fighter. I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to go.
How is that different?
Because it's going to play like Tekken, while this one plays like Street Fighter.
Oh.
But here's the thing. Namco is actually this month releasing Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm Generations, and this is a licensed game that has over 70 characters in it, and none of them are locked off behind some bullshit DLC code.
Somebody's doing it right.
That's more characters than Street Fighter Cross Tekken has, even after the DLC characters. And Capcom wants to say it costs us too much to make all these characters.
I can imagine that a lot of effort would go into balancing all the characters, because the difference between like a 3D fighting game and a 2D fighting game is considerable. I learned about this when they started their work on Street Fighter 4, which of course ended up getting reissued like 5-6 times. That Super Street Fighter 4
like
and
that.
Well, to my understanding, they actually can't do that with this game because Namco won't let them.
Thank goodness. At least Namco is there to put them to beat some sense into them. Namco knows what the hell they're doing, and Namco is a fairly old company.
But instead, they're trying to work their way around it and go, well, we'll just charge people for what's on the disc instead, since Namco won't let us release another game.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was their thought process behind this.
It's scary.
Well,
Yeah.
Moving on from the topic of Street Fighter X Tekken, let's move on to Mass Effect 3, which apparently is also getting a considerable backlash today due to just legal and bullshit business practices. Chris,
day one DLC. Chris might know a little bit about it because he's actually playing it.
I am playing it. Right now, I have not downloaded anything for it because I refuse to do anything through Origin. First of all, I mean the only downloadable content that came with it was the pre-order content. So that would be the rifle and stuff like that. So as far as any legal things that have happened with Mass Effect today,
It's been like
I have.
if you look at something like Metacritic, every single user review of the game, it has an average review of 12 out of 100.
That's not good.
Because
What?
everybody is so pissed off about the short-sighted business practices of the companies of EA and I guess in this case, I guess BioWare would be to blame as well, that they are violently downvoting this game.
Let me see if I can dig something up real quick, because I don't have my copy yet, so I haven't had any reason to look on the marketplace to see what's supposedly up for it. But I've heard a lot of people complaining that because there's day one DLC.
I had heard that there was day one DLC, like Shadows or Ashes, something like
From
that.
Ashes.
From Ashes, yes. I had heard about it, and I'd heard it was going to be day one, and I don't really like day one DLC anyway.
Sort of understand
because
they had a really
like, kind of like that stuff that.
And they had a really good explanation for it. Day one DLC had a really good explanation for it. They say that the game itself takes so long to go through the approval process that during the time between when the game is finalized, when it goes gold, and when the game actually comes out, they have like 3-4 months, and that's when they work on the DLC. Because that doesn't take as long to go through the approval process. That is probably the most legitimate excuse I've heard for day one DLC.
Well, the other thing is, the game obviously goes gold before the day that it hits shelves.
Obviously,
So...
there's like a 3-4 month distance between that time. What's the company supposed to do in that time? They either work on a new game or they work on additional content for this game. If they're planning on having DLC for the game anyway, they start working on it then. I guess people would want them to work on it longer, so then they don't get it as soon.
I guess. And the thing is that there's two sides to this argument as well, because there are a lot of people that feel any DLC at all, under any circumstances, is wrong. That any DLC that's released means that content was held back from the game. And to those people I say, apparently you don't remember these things called expansion packs. They were released after the game originally came out, usually far after the game originally came out.
Well, there's sort of a fine line between this. I mean, there's people who there's expansion packs and there's DLC. In a lot of cases they are the same, but then you know that there are companies that do this. Yeah. They take features out of the game that should have been in there and they implement it later into DLC. Whether it was properly designed in the game itself, whether it needed extra testing, that's up for grabs. But it really is sort of a double-edged sword. If you want to improve the game, you have to release it out there somehow. I mean, we live in a time when, like 10 years ago, the thought of DLC would have absolutely been unnecessary. I mean, at 10, maybe 20 years ago. I mean, something like Super Mario Brothers. What kind of DLC could they have had? They could have had an entire new four new levels, or even 2 new levels, two new entire worlds that you go to after you defeat it, or after you defeat the Buzzy Beetle section after playing through the game once. Then everybody's replaced with Spinies or something. Or they have new enemies that you can encounter. But this is just...
Obviously, there are going to be plenty of cases where there's content being still worked on long after the game came out. Like, for instance, with Dynasty Warriors 7, the game came out early last year. They're still making costumes and weapons for that game that aren't on the disc. And they had not thought this far in advance, because now they're releasing Warriors Orochi 3, which features some of the characters from that game because it's a crossover game between Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors. Some of those characters they have some of the DLC weapons, but there's still new DLC weapons being added to Dynasty Warriors 7 that aren't in Warriors Orochi 3 because they didn't plan that far ahead. So it's clearly not content that was withheld in that case.
And even I could be considered to be guilty of improving a game that I originally released. I originally released a game a couple years ago that it was done as part of a contest, so I had a deadline for it. Then about a year later, it was coming around to Halloween again, and it was a Halloween-themed game. So I decided to go into the game, add a couple of new features, and fix a lot of the bugs, and I released it as a special edition that I still made available for free. And I just speaking as a developer and as a consumer, I can understand when people want to continue improving their games, but there is certainly a fine line between what is improving and what is deliberately crippling so that they can fix it later.
Yeah. And that's been particularly obvious with this generation, not just with DLC, but with games that get released in spite of having game-breaking bugs.
Yeah.
Skyrim for the PS3 being a perfect example.
Well, a lot of the Bethesda games have been... those games are so huge, it's really hard to test everything.
Yeah.
Still, but having game crashes and pretty serious bugs... I mean, if that's the case where it's a huge game, allot yourself more time. Because Skyrim is one of those franchises, it's at a point now where you could release whenever you want.
True.
Nobody is gonna tell you, no, you can't release that. Because no matter when you release a game like that, it will sell. You can get the holiday crowd. I mean, they're gonna come in. Absolutely. But you can sell that game in March, and those kids who got gift cards or even people who got gift cards are gonna come in and still buy it no matter what time of year you release it. So there's really no excuse for a Skyrim to have as many bugs as it does. It's still a great game, don't get me wrong, but we're not
exactly.
your playtest.
Even with all the bugs and problems with the game like Skyrim or even the Fallout series, even with all those game-breaking bugs, it was still getting like 95, 100% ratings due to just how fantastic and detailed the games are. So that's the kind of effort you need to put into your game if you want it to be so well received. You can't just take a bunch of characters and give them different moves from different franchises, slap them into a game together, and charge for half of them again. It doesn't work that way. You have to actually put effort into your games if you want to get the money out of it for the people that care about it. And there's people who pirated Skyrim, but then there's people that know that Skyrim isn't going to bullshit them. You buy Skyrim and you get the game. You don't buy, but you buy Street Fighter X Tekken and you have half a game.
Right.
It's not particularly that bad because it's 12 characters out of 50 missing, but yeah.
Still,
$60 for the game,
chunk.
$5 for it. And also, pricing of this DLC is ridiculous. $5 for one character, is it?
That's what it will likely be. Capcom hasn't specifically said a price point yet, but the thing is, their past price points kind of point towards that.
Yeah.
We've seen what they charge in the past, because they charge $4 for stupid costume packs that don't even really add anything to the game.
Oh, you want to see because you want to see the female characters with more boobage showing.
Sometimes
Obviously.
that's not even the case. Sometimes it's less boobage showing. But Chris, you haven't gotten a whole lot to say, and do you got anything specific you want to say in regards to DLC while we're on the topic?
Well, you guys both know that I'm not really a big fan of digital distribution, whether that be DLC or games,
Steam.
full games, or Steam. Nobody uses that fucking service, man. You know that.
Yeah, nobody uses Steam. Hey, Ozzy, I'll play Borderlands with you tomorrow.
Sure.
Yeah, you guys can be the only two. Anyway, I've never really been a big fan of that. I've always preferred to actually own a copy, because in my opinion, that's the only way that I can be 100% sure that it is mine. It is undoubtedly, unequivocally mine. I can do with it whatever I want. If I have a friend who wants to borrow it, I can let him. With anything downloaded, not the case. So,
Which, yeah, that is one draw of the digital download service, because it is really locked to you as a user. But I mean, if you, when I buy games, I tend to know that I'm going to own the games, because I don't tend to really sell games back to. I wouldn't be caught dead selling a game back to GameStop. If I was going to sell a game, I would sell it directly to another person, or trade it for another game that they have. I mean, that is one interesting thing that you can do. You can get a bunch of friends together that they bring all the games that they don't like, that they just don't play anymore, and you just trade games with each other. Have a party, trade games, and then if in the off chance you want that game back, you know the person.
Yeah.
You know, here's an interesting side to this that I hadn't really thought of until just what Chris was talking about, is when you actually have the physical copy and own it, that's the only way you can really be sure you own it, because who knows what's going to be going on with these online services far down the road. Like, highly unlikely anyhow, but say 20 years from now, you want to play Street Fighter Cross Tekken, but the old service is down, none of the files are there anymore, and for whatever reason, your data on your hard drive got corrupted, and you no longer have the unlock keys. You now have no way to play as those characters ever again.
Well, the way it works, that's also very true of modern games. I mean, if you look back at something like, if you look at a game like Chase the Chuck Wagon for the Atari 2600, good luck finding that game in an actual physical cartridge form. Your only choice is digital download. You download a ROM of the game. I don't know why you would want to play Chase the Chuck Wagon. It's not a very good game, but the point stands. There's going to be ways to get these games. I mean, you look on, whether legally or not, but if you look at a game like Doom, there's people who have bought the same game 5-6 times because they like it so much.
Think of it this way, though. Let's go with that. Say you were one of those people who bought Chase the Chuck Wagon on the Atari 2600 all those years ago.
Actually, I don't think you could buy it. I think it was only through a special order through the company. But go on.
Now that's completely irrelevant. Let's just say you are a person who owns a physical copy of Chase the Chuck Wagon, and 20 years from now, you want to play Chase the Chuck Wagon, and because you already have a copy, you can. You can play, as long as you can hook up your Atari, you can still play it. You don't have to go through the idiocy of dealing with all these different services and paying all these fees. You've already paid once. You have your game. You can just put it in the Atari and play. And that's why I don't like DLC, because exactly, going off of exactly what Ozzy said, let's use Mass Effect as an example. Let's say 20 years from now I want to do a full playthrough of the 3 games again. And, I downloaded the Shadow Broker's Lair DLC and Bringing Down the Sky. I downloaded all those and From Ashes. And I want to play these 20 years from now. I'm not going to be able to, because all those servers are going to be down. Because we'll be on Generation 12 or whatever we're at that point. So I'm not going to have the...
Although I still think that... Go on again.
I'm not going to have the full experience I paid for that I would have had I just had a physical copy. Like, for example, you had the option with Grand Theft Auto 4. They came out with Ballad of Gay Tony, and they came out with The Lost and Damned. You could buy those as an actual disc, Episodes from Liberty City, or, you could get the Game of the Year edition, but that's a whole nother can of worms. But you have the option, say 2 people, one of them gets the download of Episodes from Liberty City, and one person has the disc. 20 years from now, the person who has the disc is not going to have any problem just putting it in his system and continuing to play, because he paid for it. You're not gonna be able to play online because all those servers will be down, but all the content that you paid for to play, you're going to have access to.
Well, that may be true, but also think about it retroactively. What game from 20 years ago have you had the urge to play that you have not been able to play?
Well, Chris isn't that old yet, so that's kind of hard for him to answer.
Okay,
I am
15
only-
years, whatever.
Well, that's different because I own copies of games from that time period that I want to play. And my example is Chrono Trigger.
And but you can get that game in multiple other places. You can buy that game on the Nintendo Virtual Console, I believe, and you could also.
That's the thing.
And of course you could also emulate it, or you could buy it again on the DS. These games are constantly.
If I already have the game, why would I go through all that trouble and pay again? Why would I want to pay again for a game that I can play, where the only thing I have to do is take a cable and plug it into my TV and turn the system on? And like literally right now, if I wanted to play Chrono Trigger right at this very second, it would only take me 20 seconds to get it up and running.
Well, a lot of people don't have that luxury. A lot of them don't have to sell their system later. A lot of them, they have to, when they upgrade to a new system, when they bought their 360, they had to sell their PS2 and all their games. And there's a lot of people who don't have that same luxury. So when a game is linked to their account, even if they have to like sell their PC to pay food rent that month, yeah, food rent, whatever.
Food rent, yeah.
If they had to pay for food and rent that month, a couple months down the line, they're still going to have access to these games. They can't sell the games themselves, but this is the luxury that we have, the price of having to pay for this luxury, that we could download these games at any time.
Yeah. I think you're kind of at a stalemate, and it kind of proves the point that it's really a two-edged sword.
Yeah, there's so many there's so many thoughts on the same camp, and some of them are right, some of them are wrong. But the one thing that I think we all can agree on is that charging money that should be we should be able to access on the disc is as evil as you can get.
Yeah, and I honestly. When I was arguing with people on GameFAQs about this, and there were people defending Capcom's actions, and I was trying to figure out the best way to insult them without saying something that would get myself banned off of the forum. So I just said, I pray to the God that I don't even believe in that you're not a registered voter.
Because you could really do some damage.
Well,
Yeah.
I think talking about democracy will have to be a discussion for another time. Anyway, I think that's good for now. This has been Gamers Without Borders. This was Test Zero.
And Chris, the nerd.
And the man in the top hat, Ozzy.
And we'll see you next time, everybody. Leave a comment below. Tell us what you think about the topic of DLC, digital download distribution, and gamers' rights for owning or renting or leasing their games as they own them. And we will see you guys next time. Bye-bye, folks.